I'll be right back after he's done.
Thanks, Clint, for that very kind introduction. And Eastown, it is great to be with you. Again, my name is Gabe Garcia. I'm the lead pastor of a new church startup in Oakland, California. My family, the Garcias, we moved to Oakland May 1st in the middle of this once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. And we came with hopes and dreams of starting a gospel-centered, diverse, disciple-making church. And you know what? Even in the middle of the pandemic, we've just seen and sensed that God is with us every step of the way. And Eastown, you're a big part of that. We just want to thank you for your support, your prayers, just staying with us and behind us in everything we do. We do need your help right now. We're in this kind of stage where we're just trying to meet every person possible. So if you know anybody in or around Oakland, we would love it if you connected us with those people. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram at NCC Oakland, or you can email me directly at gabeg@nccoakland.org. Now, Eastown, New Year's is right around the corner. And this is usually the time of the year where we make new resolutions, these goals and aspirations we have for the upcoming year. We're going to eat healthier, we're going to work out more, we're going to spend time in the garden, or we're going to read more books. Whatever it may be, before we know it, we've filled our lives with more and more stuff. And these good intentions move from being good intentions to actually becoming weighty burdens. But what if 2021 was less about what you did and more about us leaning into and enjoying a rest that comes from above? Today, I'm going to have the privilege of talking about the rhythm of rest. And I love talking about rest because whether you're a follower of Jesus or you're a devout atheist, my sense is we're all looking for rest. And I'm not just talking about momentary rest. I'm not talking about a good nap. Though a good nap during the holiday season with the football game on the background, like that's pretty magical. That's God ordained. Those are sacred moments. We want to keep those moments. But I'm talking about a different type of rest. I'm talking about a rest for the soul, a rest that reaches down and penetrates the deepest parts of our existence. Now, we are going to be talking about different practices to incorporate into our lives. But before we do that, we have to talk about the true source of where rest is found, because we can be experts at incorporating all these different practices and still be some of the most tired, exhausted, and miserable people. Hopefully what you're going to see today, Eastown, is that true rest is not found in something you do. True rest is found in a person. True rest is found in Jesus. I'm going to be reading from Matthew chapter 11. Listen to these words, follow along with me as I read God's word. Matthew 11, verses 25 to 30. At that time, Jesus declared, "I thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, that you have hidden these things from the wise and understanding, and you have revealed them to little children. Yes, Father, for such was your gracious will. All things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him." Listen to these words, verses 28, 29, and 30. This is really where we'll focus our time this week. "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." So here's kind of like the big idea for our time together. True rest is not something we work to achieve. True rest is something we humbly receive. I'll say that one more time. True rest is not something we work to achieve. It's something we humbly receive. And this is like a counterintuitive rest. It's not a rest that we finally get to experience as we push through the fall semester and then enjoy kind of the holiday break. It's not a rest that becomes ours after we work for 40 years and finally step into retirement. It's a rest that is available today, but it's not based on anything we do. So here's kind of like an outline for where we'll be going, kind of table of contents for our time together. 3 main headings. We're going to talk about the burdens we carry, the gentleness of Jesus, and the promise of rest. The burdens we carry, the gentleness of Jesus, and the promise of rest. Let's look at that first heading, the burdens we carry. Verse 28 says this, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." We look at that verse, we look at that text, and there is an invitation there. And there's a promise there. And we're going to talk about that invitation and that promise. But before we talk about invitation and promise, I want you to see to whom this invitation and promise is made. It's made to those who are tired. It's made to those who are exhausted. It's made to those who are burdened. How many of us have been burdened by 2020? 2020 has impacted each and every one of us to some degree, in some capacity, maybe financially, emotionally, physically, spiritually. It's impacted everyone. And what's so amazing about the God of the Bible is that God will continually call us to cast our burdens upon him. It's amazing. It's beautiful. But in Matthew chapter 11, I think Jesus is talking about a different burden. It's a burden that rests upon all of our shoulders as we seek and search for a rest for our souls. There's a word he actually uses here, the word labor, and it carries the idea of being wearied and troubled. Think about that. Jesus calling out to the troubled ones, those who are troubled and burdened by this unshakable quest to find an otherworldly type of rest. It's a burden that impacts each and every one of us. Before moving to Oakland, my family lived in a suburban community outside of Southern California. And most of my life has been kind of bouncing back and forth between suburban and urban communities. And I've learned to love and enjoy both. Both have their advantages and both have their challenges, their traps and their idols. What's interesting about suburban communities is on the outside, everything looks nice and tidy and clean, perfect, picture perfect. But if you really stop and listen to people, my sense was that people were filling their lives with more and more stuff. They were overwhelmed by the busyness of life. I don't know if you can relate to that at all. Again, from the outside, everything looked picture perfect, but on the inside, everyone was searching for something more. And we'd fill our lives with more and more stuff, hoping that that stuff would satisfy kind of the cries of our heart. If we could just get our kids into that school and get them the best coaches, then we would experience rest. If we could just kind of remodel that bathroom, then we would experience rest. If I could fill my life with good works and good deeds, then I would experience rest. Whether suburban or urban communities, San Ramon or Oakland, all of us, each and every one of us, we're seeking and searching for rest, but oftentimes we're working for that rest. And that life, that pattern of life, eventually catches up with us. And it never leads to more rest. It always leads to more and more exhaustion. I want you to hear this. Working for rest always leads to burden. Working for rest always leads to burden. If we're trying to find rest by our works, our successes, our accomplishments, it will never satisfy the cries of our heart for a different type of rest. Augustine would say that our hearts are always restless until they rest in God. And I don't know who you are, and I don't know your story, but my sense is that there are restless hearts that are probably tuning in. And before we go any further, I want you to hear this. God sees you, he sees your burden, and he wants to lift that burden. But in lifting that burden, he doesn't call you to do anything. He sends his son to do something for you. Again, just one more time, God sees your burden. He wants to lift that burden. But in lifting that burden, he doesn't call you to do anything. He sends his son to do something for you. And that's good news in 2020, and it's good news in 2021. Let's look at our second heading. We just talked about the burdens we carry. Let's talk about the gentleness of Jesus. Remember in our passage, there's this invitation where Jesus says, "Come to me." But as we come to Jesus, how are we really sure that Jesus is going to receive us? If you read through the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, it's really kind of the life and ministry of Jesus. As Jesus is interacting with a number of different people, it always seems that he's doing one of two things. He's either rebuking those who are proud, or he's gently receiving those who are humble. He's rebuking the spiritually proud, or he's receiving the spiritually humble. And when Jesus is rebuking the proud, like, he doesn't hold anything back. Like, we don't want to mess around with Jesus. He's holy, righteous. He's a king. But he also, this same king, gently receives those who will humbly come to him. And it's always surprising the type of people that Jesus is gently receiving. It's sinners and tax collectors. It's prostitutes and lepers. It's children and women. It's like everybody who's at the very bottom culturally, like everybody who's at the very bottom of society. And it's almost like being at the very bottom of society prepared in them a heart that was willing and desiring to cry out to Jesus for help. For many of us, we're fearful in coming to God because we know that there's something ugly and unattractive about our lives. And we tell ourselves this lie, like, if God is going to receive me, if God is going to give me the rest that my heart is looking for, I have to kind of clean up a little bit. I have to place a couple filters on my life so that God would receive me. But I want you to hear what Jesus says. And again, remember, Jesus is talking to those who are tired, exhausted, and burdened. What does Jesus say in verse 29? Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle. Think of all the words that Jesus could have used to describe himself. I am king, I am holy, I am righteous, I am sovereign. All of these things are true of Jesus, but to the tired, the wearied, and the burdened, Jesus says, come to me, for I am gentle. Think about how powerful and hope-giving those specific words would have been to those who are often marginalized and forgotten in society. And it seems like the one factor determining whether or not you were rebuked by Jesus or received by Jesus was really the humility of those before him. To the proud and arrogant, there was judgment, there was condemnation. But to the humble, there was invitation and there was reception. Remember our main point? True rest is not something that we work to achieve. It's something we humbly receive. I want you to hear this, no matter who you are and what you've done in your life. If you turn towards Jesus, you will be met by the gentleness of God. No matter who you are, what you've done, where you've been, the decisions you've made, if you turn towards Jesus, you will be met by the gentleness of God. Like the God who is almighty, the God who created the heavens and the earth, split the Red Seas, raised Jesus from the dead. This God who is rightly to be feared is the same God who will gently receive those who are humble. I know this is hard for us to really understand or even just imagine. I have 3 kids, and you've probably heard parents say this before, how enjoyable it is to see the unique ways that God has designed each and every one of our kids, like the unique personalities and gifts and passions that kind of come out of our kiddos. Amazing, beautiful little family. My oldest, Brandon, he's just like his dad, very, very cautious. My younger son, Micah, just 4 years old, he's a beast of a boy, and he lives the entirety of his life on the very edge. Like every single day of his life, like we are ready to make a trip to the emergency room. We got a little bag packed with Micah's name on it. We're ready just to grab that bag and head to the ER. Every single day, this crazy boy comes running to his dad, scraped and bruised and tears running down his face. And he's scraped and bruised with tears running down his face because of a foolish decision that he has made. But when he turns towards me, scraped and bruised, tears running down his face, I don't rub his foolishness back in his face. I wipe his tears, I comfort him in his pain, and I remind him how much I love him. When you turn towards God in humility, scraped and bruised, tears running down your face, God does not rub your foolishness back in your face. He gently receives you, he comforts you in your pain, and he reminds you how much he loves you. Again, I don't know who you are and I don't know your story, but we're all searching and seeking for rest. Jesus promises us that when we turn towards him, we're going to experience that rest. And when we turn towards him, we're going to be met by the very gentleness of God. Let's look at our last heading, the promise of rest. We looked at the burdens we carry. We looked at the gentleness of Jesus. And finally, let's look at the promise of rest. We already noted in verses 28 that there was an invitation and there was a promise. There's this invitation where Jesus says, come to me. That's really the invitation, right? And there's a really important word right after that, all. Come to me, everyone who's wearied and burdened, no matter who you are, what you've done, your background, life story, culture, ethnicity, everyone. And that really points to just the beauty, the power of who Jesus is and what he has done for us. But then Jesus will lead us to the promise. And he repeats the promise 2 different times, verses 28 and 29, just to make sure we understand what he is offering. Jesus says, I will give you rest. Not temporary rest, not momentary rest. It's a rest for our souls. And I want you to hear this. With all that's going on in our world today, with all the burdens that are weighing upon your shoulders, there's a rest that is available to us in Jesus. Now, this does not mean that our everyday burdens are simply going to disappear. No, the pandemic is still here. We'll still have to wear a mask. We'll still do so much of life online. Your kids are going to keep being your kids. Politicians are going to be politicians. But in the midst of all of that, Jesus promises us a rest for our souls as we are restored back to a right relationship with God. All that's going on, everyday burdens are still there, a rest for our souls as we're restored back to a right relationship with God. See, all of our searching and seeking, whether we know it or not, really is a quest for God. But as I look back on my life, my searching and seeking led me in all the wrong places. Like, we don't have enough time to talk about that right now. That's a different day, a different sermon. We need Clint out here to counsel me. Michael out here to counsel me. All of our searching and seeking leads us to the wrong places. And this is why Jesus has come searching and seeking for us. This is why Jesus clothed himself in human flesh, enters into our pain, enters into our brokenness, goes to a cross, raises from the dead. We can say like this, Jesus works so that we can rest. He works so that we can rest. Jesus works through his life, death, and resurrection so that we can rest in him. Tim Keller, in a book called Every Good Endeavor, would say it like this. But if we can experience gospel rest in our hearts, if we can be free from the need to earn our salvation through our work, we will have this deep reservoir of refreshment that continually rejuvenates us, restores our perspective, and renews our passion. That's my prayer for us in 2021, Eastown, that we would experience this deep reservoir of refreshment that flows from a deep and abiding relationship with God. Now, before we wrap up, I want to give us really quickly 5 rhythms to enjoy the rest of Jesus. 5 rhythms to enjoy the rest of Jesus. These are simple, like everyday practices. Many of us probably have already incorporated it into our lives, but maybe there's just one that would challenge us or encourage us in 2021. Now, as we incorporate these different practices into our lives, my heart really isn't that they would become more burden, just another thing we have to do. These practices really are designed to bring us joy in life as they are connected to the rest we have in Jesus, right? The power of these practices is really found as we connect them back to the rest that we have in Jesus. So number 1, 5 rhythms to enjoy the rest of Jesus really quickly. Number 1, enjoy a day away from work. I feel like in 2020, with all that's going on in COVID, it's a little bit harder. All of life seems to be blending together. But if we look back at the very first chapters of the Bible, we see that God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and then on the seventh day, he rested. And he rested to enjoy his beautiful creation, all that he had done, his amazing work. And as image bearers, God invites us to actually follow this pattern of living. I have found that actually putting work down for just one day really is an issue of like my heart. It really is a spiritual discipline. Like, do I trust the God who oversees the heavens and the earth, like governs all of life? Do I trust God with my life as I step away for one day from my work? And as we step away one day, not only does it bring us kind of physical and mental health, but it also reminds us that just like I can lay down my work for a day, I can also lay down my effort in trying to earn my salvation or work in a way to please God. No, we are right with God, not because of our work, but because of the work of Jesus. So number one, enjoy a day away from work. Number two, enjoy the beauty of God's creation. God is the master artist, and he invites all of his friends and family to marvel at the beauty of his work. Now in 2020, where it feels like most of our lives are lived online or kind of connected and looking at a screen, again, there is mental and physical health that comes with just putting some of that stuff down and going outside and marveling at the stars above us, the mountains behind us, and the seas in front of us. And as we marvel at the beauty of God's creation, again, it's meant to lead us back to the greatness of God. Number three, enjoy margin in your life. I really feel like God works in really unexpected and beautiful ways when there's margin or room in your life. But to have margin in our lives, we have to be willing to say no sometimes. And having margin isn't just about having more me time. It's really making ourselves more available to the unexpected ways that God may be working in or around us. I feel like since being in Oakland, I've had more margin in my life than ever before, and it's been so rewarding to look back on 6 or 7 months and see the opportunities that God has brought about, the conversations that God has brought about, the relationships that God has brought about, because we've just had a little bit of margin in our life. Enjoy margin. Number four, enjoy stepping away from social media. Social media has brought about a lot of good, but as a pastor, I'm becoming more and more concerned about the toxic effect it's just had on my own heart, let alone like the church at large. Again, social media can be used for good purposes, but I think there's value in us resting or fasting from social media. So try to designate some hours within the day that we stay away from social media, a day within the week where we stay away from social media. And again, as we rest from social media, we don't get to just fill that with more binging on Netflix. We try to make ourselves more available to the things of God. And number five, enjoy gathering with God's people. I hope 2020 has just reminded us how much we really need each other. And I don't know what 2021 is going to look like, if we're going to be doing more online or we're eventually going to be able to gather together. Either way, historically, the church has just gathered together to do sometimes what seems to be foolish things like pray and sing and study God's word. But God works in some of these foolish things. And as we come together and we commit to coming together, we're reminded of ultimately how good it is to be considered the very children of God, how lucky we are to have brothers and sisters in the faith. And ultimately, we continue to encourage each other of the true rest that is found in Jesus. So no matter what is going on, never minimize the simple rhythm of gathering together. Eastown, my hope and prayer is that as we incorporate some of these rhythms into our lives, it'll give us the opportunity to reflect upon and be refreshed by the true rest that is found in Jesus. Eastown, I'm praying for you. I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful for the ways that God is working in you and through you. God bless.